Welcome to the Women's Football Show here on PLZ Soccer's YouTube channel. I'm Kerry Pollock, Alison McConnell is with me, and today our special guest is Hibs captain Joelle Murray. Joelle, thank you very much for joining us here today.
Thanks for having me.
First of all, one woman club, Hibernian, since 2004, 78 appearances. Tell us, how have you enjoyed your time at the club?
Loved it, absolutely loved it. I think in the modern day game, especially now, it's very rare that a player kind of devotes their whole career to one club. We've actually got across, obviously, the men as well. We've got Lewis and Paul who've done the same. But for me, it's a club I support. It's a club I love. So when there were offers in the past, it was always a kind of decision between head and heart.
How has the game changed, do you feel, since you were coming through as a youngster, breaking into the first team, to now being an experienced player that you are?
Massively changed. I think the evolution of the women's game in general, not just at the club, has been so progressive. I remember when I first started out, you trained on a Tuesday and a Thursday and played a Sunday, and it was acceptable if you missed one of the training sessions and you still got your game on a Sunday. And fast forward to the current and present day, and there's so many things that we need to consider in terms of sports science, nutrition, the training element, the balance. So yeah, it's progressed massively since I first started.
You said when clubs were coming in, was that early on in your career? How was that? Did you deal with that?
Yeah, it was fairly early to probably mid-career. A few managers that I'd worked with at Hibs had come in. There was offers when I was very young, I think at 17, from scholarships abroad, and I'm quite a family orientated person, and for me it just wasn't, I think the lifestyle, it was a move to Florida, the lifestyle would have been fantastic, but the distance would have just been too much. So yeah, it was always a difficult decision at times, but certainly that one was an easy one for me to decline. Was there
ever any moments of maybe a little bit of regret that you didn't try anything else further afield?
I don't think so. I think for me, I've thoroughly enjoyed my career at Hibs, and I still do. Every time I pull on the strip, it's a proud moment for me. So certainly no regrets. When the offers came in, I fully considered everything. Money doesn't motivate me because, of course, at the time the offers came in, there was a kind of financial element from the club expressing the interest, but because that's not a motivator, that was kind of just instantly dismissed. And I guess I considered everything on and off the pitch, and always remained and wanted to stay at the club.
And there's a good balance within the squad of experienced players and younger girls as well. How key has that been to the success of getting the top 6 place as well?
I think it's fantastic. I think any club needs that experience and youth blend. I think there's so many qualities that obviously experienced players have, but also so many qualities that the young players have. I mean, I'm still learning from young players at the club, like Rosie Livingston and people like that, and vice versa. So I think it's so important to have that mix and blend of youth and experience in any team.
Do you enjoy that in-house competitiveness as well, like kind of playing for places as well on the pitch?
Oh, absolutely. The girls will tell you, I hate losing. Even at training, I absolutely hate losing. So if we're playing 2v2s, 4v4s, anything, I'm a born winner, a natural winner, and if I'm losing, I'm not happy at all.
Is that something that the younger girls take from you and into games then, that competitive head?
Yeah, I'd like to think so. I think it's, at the end of the day, we train so hard and we work so hard to play at the end of the week, and the ultimate goal is to get your 3 points or your cup progressions. So I think if you didn't have that in you or that inner drive, I'd question why you're playing at the elite end of the sport. But yeah, I think the girls take that passion, that determination, and that kind of want to win from me.
We'll just have a look at the results from the weekend in the Scottish Cup. It was Montrose 0, Celtic 6, Thistle 0 at Hearts 1, Hibernian 2, Rangers 6, Livingston 0 and the Spartans 5. An exit to the Scottish Cup, Joelle, but how do you see that game and how that panned out?
I think disappointing and frustration are probably the two emotions that come to mind. I think the first half especially saw that we can compete with the teams above us. And I think the frustration comes from us not being able to mirror the first half with the second half. And that's unfortunately become a little bit of a theme this season, and those kind of top 6 kind of clinical games whereby we'll have a good first half, and we can't kind of replicate that in the second. So yeah, a kind of frustration and frustrated day all round from us, because I think in the first half especially we were the better team.
Such a key moment too, just at the start of the second half, you know, you go miss that chance, it could have taken you 3-2 up, and then all of a sudden, before you know it, the roof's falling in a wee bit.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's those, we've spoke about it many times, those clinical moments in games that can change the momentum, and I think you're right, Alison. I think that certainly swung the momentum. We had a fantastic chance to take the lead, and whether we're ball watching or thinking about what's happening in that moment, and the flip of a coin, we're on the back foot and we're a goal down. So absolutely, I think that was a key moment in the game, and to lose I think it was 2 or 3 goals in 5 minutes at the end of the game, it's unacceptable. And yes, I think a frustrating day all round from us.
It's interesting too, I think that the results now mean that it's the first time for 23 years that Hibs and Glasgow City, who have dominated this tournament for so long, aren't represented in the semi-finals. Do you think that's indicative of just the wider landscape across the women's game and the shift that we've seen across the last 5 years or so?
Yeah, I think so. I think if you're Celtic or Rangers, with the money that they're investing into their women's team, there's probably an element of a kind of necessity to play in the later stages of the cup, the semi-finals and finals. So there's probably a pressure from them, but for us, there's an internal pressure because, like you said, we've had a fantastic history in both league and cup league and Scottish Cup competitions. So yeah, it's disappointing that we can't progress, and we haven't progressed, but it's certainly something that we'd like to rectify next season, because we are very proud of our cup runs, our history in both tournaments, and we want to get back to those levels of success.
Do you feel as though the gap's as wide as what the table would suggest, as what cup results would suggest, or do you feel as though it's plausible to bridge it?
I think it is plausible to bridge it. I think, again, going back to what I said about yesterday, the first half showed that we can more than compete with these teams. It's just getting that consistency of performance. I certainly don't think the league table reflects the quality within the league. You saw Partick Thistle holding Rangers to a draw a few weeks ago. So yeah, I think I'd like to think that gap can be bridged going into next season.
Do you think that when you start the season, do you set targets on what the bare minimum is for the club, like getting to certain stages of the cup, meeting that top 6 spot?
Yeah, and I think as a club that wants to win and be successful, I think you need to do that. Our ultimate goal was to be better in the league than we were last season, so better in our points total, scoring more goals, conceding less goals, and progressing further in the cup. And of course, that's something that has probably been deemed as a failure this year, considering where we went last year. But I think ultimately those goals need to be set, and we as a club have set kind of micro goals as well, because I think it's important to be present. Obviously, you've got your long-term goals, but I think it's very important to be present and focus on the next game, and not be disrespectful to any upcoming opposition.
You come up against Thistle this weekend, this Sunday. Have you been unsurprised about how well they've done this season?
Yeah, I think they've got a really good manager in Brian Graham, and I think he has got the team playing the way that he plays. He's instilled that kind of combativeness, that aggressiveness, and yeah, I've not been surprised at all, because they're a good team. We spoke about having a mixture of youth and experience, and they're a prime example of that. They've got players who've played in the league for very long, but they've equally so got a good group and bunch of young players to add to the blend. So yeah, it'll be an interesting game on Sunday. It always is. I'd like to hope and think that we can come out on top this time, because they, and quite rightly so, have had the better and upper hand of us.
Do you enjoy this end of the season, the kind of business end, as they like to call it, going up against the top 6 and facing off against one another?
Yeah, I think so. I think for me, you always want to compete and play against the best players, the best teams. There's questions about the number of games that we play in the top six. I think it's a very long season as it is, especially when you add in the international games. So to then play each other twice again, I think fatigue plays an element of a lot of kind of games. And as a player, I'd probably like to see that reduced to just playing each other once and reduce the season.
That's interesting, because this season in particular is going to be long because of the way that the European qualifying dates have played out. So you're going to have then 6 games coming on the back of the season that takes you right up until July. There's almost no natural break there, because you think even if you take a bit of time in June, I know there's no games in June, you're going to have to be coming back and be prepared to go straight in to international football for some people.
Yeah, and I think gone are the days where you can take your full and complete rest. I think now every player has and should have an eye on pre-season and when you come back. So I think when you consider that, Alison, with players that are obviously playing domestically and with the national team, I think they'll be looking at when and where they can rest and recover, but also have an eye on knowing that they're coming back for pre-season games and knowing that they need to keep themselves in shape.
It's almost becoming a year-long cycle. It's almost becoming just a natural, and you see that in the men's game too, that summers that used to be maybe a 6-week break, a 4-week break, or maybe now some players will get 10 days, 7 days, and I think you're seeing that in the women's game. Do you think that the speed with which that's happened across recent seasons is a big part of maybe, or is tied in to some of the injuries that we've seen in the numbers of injuries, of serious injury that we've seen?
Potentially. I think fatigue and any injury always plays some element. Obviously there's been injuries that have been contact injuries, there's injuries that haven't, but I think certainly fatigue is massive. At the club we always look at loading, and if a player has excessive load, then they'll certainly be tapered towards the end of the week, and I'd like to think that the majority of clubs do that, but from an association's perspective, I think it's something that definitely needs to be looked at, that kind of top and bottom 6 element of it, because as a player, it's great, as I said, to be playing these teams week in, week out, but can we just reduce it so it makes it a bit more competitive and we kind of take out the fatiguing element of it.
It's also, these are really intense games too, because of the timing of when they come, but also you're playing teams that are round about you that are very similar for those at the bottom of the table, those at the top end of the table too, which obviously leads itself to a fairly exciting finale, but at the same time too, I'd imagine it takes quite a toll.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you look at the fixtures post-split, you've got some midweek fixtures, and like you said, it's not like you're coming up against a lesser opposition. So if you're playing a top 6 team on the Wednesday, then trying to go again on the Sunday, as I said, there is an element of fatigue. So I'd like to think and hope that next season we can kind of nullify that by reducing the games so that you're not kind of diluting the quality because of potential fatigue.
And it adds an extra element of excitement as well to the league if it is only one game against one another, particularly this end of the season as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And not that we always approach every game with kind of the same mentality, same desire and passion, but I think, for example, if we're talking about Rangers, we played them 2 weeks in a row there. We know we're playing them twice again. So you often become a bit familiar.
And it's like 4 games within almost 6 weeks, 8 weeks or so.
And I think from a spectator's perspective, it takes a little bit away from it as well, because you think, well, they've played them last week, they're playing them again next week, so they might pick one of the 2 because they know that we've got another 2 coming up. So yeah, I think there's so many reasons that we should look at reducing the post-split kind of fixtures.
And it wasn't long ago, Alison, we had an Old Firm derby at Ibrox. We have another one coming up this weekend. We say it all the time on this show, it comes down to these head-to-head battles between the 2 for that top spot.
I think it's a really intriguing game this Sunday. I think Elena Saduka has stabilised things. I think that those first few weeks Celtic looked ill at ease in the aftermath of Fran Alonso going. I thought they looked like a real shadow of the team that they were. However, I think they've found their feet a bit. They've reverted back to a very similar shape. I think Celtic will feel very unlucky that they didn't take all 3 points in that game at Ibrox. I think both teams, you could argue, had chances to win it. go back to that Natasha Flint chance just when the game was poised at 1-0. I think had that gone in, I think Celtic would have left with all 3 points, which would obviously have closed the gap quite a bit. So I think there's an element of intrigue about Sunday's game. I think I've said it every week on this programme, for me Rangers have been the best team in the country. I think they've been excellent, obviously not beaten yet at all in a domestic context. But I think Celtic will feel a lot more confident going into this one than they did just going into that cup game where, you know, Elena's first game where they lost. I thought they were much more cohesive at Ibrox. I thought they looked far more threatening, a bit more solid. So it's an interesting one. And obviously, of course, it's a home game for Celtic. They'd expect a bit of backing. I think, I think it's a hugely interesting one. I think if Rangers were to come out on top, I think it's a procession towards the title. Now, if Celtic were to win it, then I think there's everything to play for. And of course, too, you've got the top two, Celtic and Glasgow City, or whoever's left in second, fighting it out for the other Champions League berth in the other place, which obviously adds a degree of interest into who finishes second.
Did you find that in derby games as well, Joelle, that when you're coming up against one another and you run Hearts close and then you meet them again, you think, wow, that does a world for our confidence here, we can bridge this?
Yeah, I think so, and I think in football confidence is massive. If you're a player playing with confidence, I think naturally your performance levels kind of increase, and I think Alison hit the nail on the head with the transitional aspect of it. I think the new manager came in and of course wanted to try and stamp her authority, implement her playing style and ethos, but I think you can see the girls are playing a lot more freely, kind of being back in that familiar setup and formation.
I think it's been interesting too that the last few games they've won by considerable margins, which obviously was a hallmark, I think, of Alonso's team. Very aggressive, very attacking minded, and for a while that seemed to stutter. But I think it's been notable that they've been really in amongst the goals again over the last couple of weeks. I think they'll be quietly confident about the game on Sunday. I think it's very interesting to see just how it plays out. I think if Rangers are on their game, I would expect Rangers to win it, but I think Celtic are capable of going and doing something.
Talk about those high score lines. Does that show the togetherness of the squad? Do you think there's been a conversation with the senior players going on there?
I think there was definitely a conversation in terms of reverting back to the shape that the players were used to, a system that they knew. I think that can be important. I think when you have a manager come in, I don't think it's a threat in particular if you say, hang on a minute, I don't think this shape's working. I think that's a sign of good coaching, that you're eager to listen to the feedback from your players and adapt and change. Everyone, of course, is going to want to put their own stamp on a team, their own identity and philosophy on it. I think coming in the middle of a season and coming in the circumstances that she did, I think there was a shock, really, the way that the alacrity with which Fran Alonso moved. There was a bit of speculation and all of a sudden he was away, and obviously he'd been such a huge figure within Celtic, a big personality, might be a bit Marmite for some people, but I think there was no doubting, there was a big character in there, and he was so associated with that Celtic team and how that they play. I think there's goals in Celtic, just the way that they set up, the players that they've got. Amy Gallagher, of course, I think is the top scorer this season so far in the league. I think they're a team who have a natural inclination to attack, and I think there's goals in various areas of the pitch. So I've not been hugely surprised that the goals are coming, particularly when you see they're playing teams that are further down the table than them. But this is their next big test, how they get on against Rangers.
Just before we finish up then, Joelle, still a lot of football to be played, top six. What's the target now between now and the end of the season for yourselves?
I think for us, we of course want to kind of build momentum going into these kind of remaining 10 games. We're under no illusion that it's going to be difficult, but that's the challenge, and we've got a lot of players, if not all players, thriving under that kind of pressure and challenge. So yeah, I don't think we wanted to put a points total or anything like that on the top six fixtures. I think we will approach each game as it comes and just hope to be better, a better version of ourselves.
Well, best of luck for the end of the season. That's all from us today. We'll be back with next week with some more action to look forward to. Thanks for watching.